Look at those bees going in and out of the hive. It's still reasonably early in the morning and the bees are getting up to go out and get those flowers, get the nectar, get the pollen. They carry almost their whole body weight back to the hive. It almost defies physics on how they can do that. They can fly like 40 kilometers an hour, which is pretty fast for a tiny little bee with tiny little wings. World Bee Day on the weekend. It's amazing that the bees have a day, and it's understandable because of how important they are to our whole food system. Without the bees, we lose a lot of the food types on the supermarket shelves, and things like coffee, things like wine, things like chocolate. As soon as you start mentioning those things, people really get it, and they understand that we need the bees. We need the bees. The humans and the European honeybee are now intertwined. Our food system relies on pollination. And a hive like this can pollinate 50 million flowers a day, which is absolutely extraordinary. There is nothing else that can do that for us. And that's why humans have shipped them all around the world wherever they've travelled to do that pollination of our agriculture. So on World Bee Day, which was on the weekend, we're giving thanks to the bees, not only the European honeybee, but all of the other little native pollinators that are really important for pollination as well. And you'll see them in your garden. If you plant flowers in your garden, you'll see the blue banded bee here that we have in Australia. You'll see the native TC bees. You'll see the fire-tailed resin bees and all sorts of things. And if you make some habitat or leave areas of your yard unkept, or put together a little pollinator house like this, you can watch the bees come and go. This is for solitary bees that only lay a few eggs down one of these tubes, raise a few young, and then they carry on. Unlike the European honeybee, which has a big colony, 50,000 bees strong when they really get going. The queen in here can lay up to 2,000 eggs a day to replenish the turn of the bees, because the foraging bees might only live for, say, 4 to 6 weeks. They're beating their wings so hard, they're doing such hard work that they will tire after that time. So the queen's job is to replenish that the numbers of bees by continuing to lay eggs, and that way you get a strong population in your hive. If I open the windows, we can have a look in and see what's going on in this hive. You can see that there's reasonable bee numbers there. I wouldn't mind seeing a few more. We haven't had a nectar flow for a while, so it's expected that there'll be less bees because they throttle their population to how much food is available. When more nectar starts to come in, which is just starting to now, we'll see that population increase. If you've got questions, put them in the comments below, and Trace will read those out and we can answer them. It's all about learning, so chime in if you've got a question. Also, if you see other people's questions and you know the answer, then chime in and answer those. It's wonderful to see a global community really helping each other, and just the way that it's just a really good trait of humans to see the way they just love to get in and help. So by all means, get in and help answer questions if you know the answer. We're actually going to pull this apart and have a look at how the bees are going inside the hive, so you can get a really good look at it. So stay tuned. First of all, we're going to light the smoker. And again, if you've got questions along the way, make sure you put them in the questions below, in the comments below. So to light this smoker, we're just going to get some mulch that we've scraped up off the ground. Here we have the pine needles, which are a really easy one to start with in a way. And I'm just going to light them by, I've got an oversized lighter here, and put them actually in like that. Now bear in mind, if you're in a fire danger area, you want to be a little bit careful, and also be a bit careful of not burning yourself. I'm going to tuck them down in with this hive tool, like this. And the idea is to get a good fire going. If you poke it all down too quick, what will happen is you'll end up with the fire going out. We want to keep this fire going. especially when you start. It's usually the problem for people is they start packing it too quickly. You want to see flames, you want to see fire for a little while so it can build up enough coals to keep it going. Now once it's really blowing good smoke like that, and if you're going gloveless, you can smoke your hands to disguise your mammal smell. But a good idea to wear gloves at first while you're lighting your smoker and also while you're beekeeping until you get very comfortable with everything. This does get quite hot, so bear that in mind. So I've just put some more in and I'm going to puff the bellows straight away, really to light up that smoke. There we go. It's going really nicely, so we'll keep adding. If it goes out, don't worry, just pull all of the contents out and start again. It's much quicker to do that than puffing and puffing and puffing forever trying to get it going again. Okay, so we're packing it full now, and then we're simply going to close it up. Now the job of the smoker is to just provide some nice cool smoke. You don't want any flames coming out here, you don't want to burn any bees, and we're just going to put that right in the entrance of the hive and give it 3 good puffs. So here we go, 1, 2, 3, and that's all we need. I'm going to leave the smoker by the front here so the returning foragers get a whiff of the scent. Now, good idea to put your bee suit on. Make sure you have a nice bee suit when you start. You want to start with a nice easy entry into beekeeping. You don't want a whole lot of stings, so put your bee suit on, middle zip up, then the side ones, and again wear your gloves at first until you're very comfortable. And then a Velcro over the top of the zippers there. Okay, this is the clear view one, which is really handy because you can see a whole lot better. And a little tip with it, we've put this Velcro on top here to pull it back towards your face. That way you get less reflection. If it's down there, you tend to get more reflections. Okay, so next we're going to take this top box off first by removing the gabled roof. Now if the wing screws are done up, you can unwind them here. If you've got questions, put them in the comments, and look at that, we have ants. So they're not a problem for the hive, but they're just a little bit annoying. So I'm going to grab my bee brush and just brush them away. There we go. And if you have trouble with the ants, after you've been brushing them away, you might need to activate the oil traps below on the legs, and that'll help deter them, creating an ant barrier. And the bees will actually keep the ants out of inside the hive, so they don't bother the bees, they just bother us. Okay. Now, I could take the top off, but what I'm going to do is actually leave the top on and take the whole box off together. And then we're going to have a look in the brood nest below. I'll move this little pollinator house over. And first of all, we're just going to crack the hive open by getting the hive tool under each corner like this. So I've decided to go above the excluder, but you can do either. And sometimes it becomes clear as you're trying to lift it which one you need to be doing. It looks to me like it might want to come with the super. So go underneath it. There we go. You're going to go around and do that to each corner. If you've got questions, put them in the comments. Have we got any coming through, Trace?
Yeah, great, Seta. You were just, one of Kiki just tuned in and said, I was just about to ask you about ants and you already answered her question, so that was a bit awesome, wondering if they were going to be a problem for her hive.
Okay.
So nice one there.
A little tip there, you can throw some cinnamon powder around and that can deter them as well.
Now, Danielle's got a question saying, what's the best way to clean the black soot out of the inside of your smoker? The holes on their one seem to be getting quite blocked.
Okay,
Got any tips on that one?
Just with your hive tool is about all you need to do. So if you open this, you can see this one could do with a clean out actually. If you see those little holes there, they're just to stop any big bits coming out of light. And all you need to do is get the chisel end of your hive tool and give it a good scrape like this. And you can see that's coming off quite easily. And that's about all you need to do.
Oh, nice.
And then you get back to getting a better flow of smoke. Very good. Good idea to remember to puff it every now and then to keep it going, as it tends to go out. World Bee Day on the weekend today. We're giving thanks to the bees and all they do for us and the important part they play in the matrix of life we all depend on. If you've got questions, put it in the comments below. Otherwise, we're just going to be taking this hive apart, having a look in, seeing how they're going down below here. Okay, so next I'm going to take the box right off the top. I'm going to do that by just levering it as we've started to do and see if we can get it to come up now. Now if it's heavy, which this has got a lot of weight in it actually, there's a bit of honey in there, even though you can't see it in the edges, then you may need to get some help. So I've got it like that, and I'm going to put it up on its end. I'll put it down here so it's out of our way. And the reason why I'm putting it on its end, so I don't squash any bees that are on the bottom there. Look at them drinking away. I've got some broken comb there that was connecting the flow frames to the excluder. And the little tongues are licking like mad. Their tongues are about 7 centimetres long. 7 millimetres long, sorry. It'd be funny if they were 7 centimetres. But they have these branched hairs all over them, and they're like a mop, if you like. And they're extending it out, lapping up the honey and pulling it back again. Okay. Next we're going to take this excluder off. Now, you have to bear in mind that the queen could be on the underside of the excluder. And I've just noticed a couple of little warning flights there, so I'm going to add a bit more smoke first. The bees are a little bit annoyed about having their hive taken apart, so we want to move slowly, give them a bit of smoke, which will help calm them. It'll get them into a different mode. Any questions?
Yeah, Cedar, just wondering, Nathan's in San Diego and just moved a wild hive into the flow hive about a couple of months ago, salvaging as much as they could, but it's creating a bit of cross comb in the frames. Is there anything that you could do, that you suggest, that could stop this from happening?
Okay, one of the most important things is the spacing. So I'll explain that in a second, just after I pull this up. So when you first put your bees in, and you might be doing all this already, but I'll explain it anyway. Quick scan for the queen, not many bees on there, which makes it easy. Nevertheless, I'll lean it up against the hive front for any bees. In case the queen was there, she could still walk in. So spacing, bees are very specific with their spacing. They want the hive centres about 32 to 35 millimetres apart. Now these are 35 millimetre frames, so it's really important that they're pressed tightly together at first, so they can draw the comb in the right spacing that they like. If they're spaced a little bit further apart, even like that much, then you're likely to get wonky comb if you're doing naturally drawn comb, or even if you're using foundation, they might put a sheet of comb in between the two. So spacing is the first thing. Always put the spacing, the extra space on the edge. Now these are a little bit grump. Here we go. And add some more smoke. So if the bees are getting grumpy and you don't like it, then feel free to add more smoke and wait a little bit. So spacing is the most important thing. And the next one is, if you start to see it going wonky, then use your hive tool just to push it back online. So if you notice that perhaps they're building straight along the comb, then they started to go wonky there, then do your best just to push it back onto the comb guide, and then give them another go. You'll mess up the comb a little bit, but the bees are very quick to fix it up, so that's okay. If they've gone really crossways, which I've actually never had happen to me, I find they're pretty good, but sometimes as they get out to the edge, they'll cross over to the other frame a bit. But if they've gone completely sideways, then you'll need to cut out the sections of brood and use rubber bands to hold them into the frames, just like you would if you were doing a cutout from a wall and installing that into a hive. You'd take the brood sections, two big rubber bands around to hold that section in place in the center of the frame, and then put them back in and put your frames close together. Now, if you've only got honey on the edges and it's gone wonky, then it might be easier just to take that out, enjoy the honeycomb, and give them another go at going straight. And you might put the frames that you're putting back in between two other ones that are going straight, and that'll help them go straight down. To me, I prefer to go no foundation at all. The reason why I like that is it's less work. You don't have to sit in the shed putting your wax and wire in the frames. One of the downsides of it is it's a little bit more work inside the hive. So you may need to, as we're talking about, correct it so the bees are going straight. But I find that more entertaining than sitting there at night time waxing and wiring frames. But each to their own. A lot of beekeepers use wax foundation, and they'll melt that with hot wires into the frame. Others use plastic foundation. So it all works, whichever one you want to do. I find the bees prefer the naturally drawn. Okay, now look at them drinking away on top of the frame again. That broken comb, they're all lined up in rows, slurping up that honey. It's amazing how quick they'll actually drink up all of that honey. Any more questions?
Yeah, Cedar, also what is the best time of the year to replace an ageing, poorly laying queen?
Ooh, best time of year. So you could really do that at any time of year, but pitch in if you've got another answer for that. If you've identified that they're not doing so well, then replacing the queen will likely help. Especially if you've got a number of hives, one's not doing so well and the other hives have been doing great, then you might want to change the queen, as you say. I'll just go ahead and do it in the warmer times of the year, because you don't really want to, if you've got a long cold winter that is, you don't want to be doing your brood inspections in that time. So any of the warmer times of the year would be the right time to replace that queen, but probably it's going to be dictated by when you can get queens, which is often earlier in the season when the breeders are breeding lots of queens, because that's when most people are wanting to start new hives. So that'll be in the springtime.
Nice. And Mark Hughes asking, Cedar, any advice? The super becomes really heavy when they're trying to lift it off. Any tips and advice on how to lift the super off? I mean, you gave a few then at the beginning.
Yes. There's one there which is that people often miss, and that this is a really good handle. We didn't put a handle on this end because it's a really good handle in itself. So take the door off and you can grab that. There's a handle on the other end. I'd really recommend lifting it so that the weight is closer to you. So while you could hold these as handles as well, that puts the box further away from you and the weight further away. You really want to keep it close to you like this, and even lean it up against your thigh there as you take it off. So your body's just staying in tight. You don't want to be doing extension lifts, and that way you can move it around like that. Now, if it is too heavy, you don't want to hurt yourself. Just get some help when you're beekeeping to lift that box off. Okay. Now, even though I've got this little caddy trace, I can't find the little tool that because I wanted to put the little shelf brackets on for
Okay, I'll go and get
frame rest. We've got one screw out here, which we can put our shelf bracket on, like that. But we don't have the one out on the other side. Well, you could do it like this. We could use the corner of the hive tool perhaps. No, it's too tight. I'm going to need to wait to get that little tool that we use for assembling. If you've got more questions, put it in the comments below. World Bee Day on the weekend, and I had a great time on Monday at my son's school. I went in there with a hive that's been painted beautifully with all sorts of education on it, and my son did a great job of presenting to the class. And of course we ate some honey and honeycomb, and it's just amazing to see how engaged the children were with the theme of the bees. And it's just a great learning experience for everyone keeping beehives and learning about bees. So I'm going to do the same on the other side. Now, if it's wobbly like that, what you want to do is just wind it in a little bit further so you've got it nice and tight like that. Good. Now this is the little tool I was looking for. And we're just winding this out just a little bit like that. A couple of turns, and let's see if we got that right. It's pretty good. So that'll make a frame rest for when we pull that first frame or two out. So now you're looking for the best one to get out. Now, I'm looking at these bees, there's decent numbers, but I'm seeing a lot of honey in here at the top. So what I want to see is some brood. So I'm going to take one of these centre ones out and just make sure we've actually got a laying queen. So from the top, I'm not seeing much. So I'm going, first of all, sideways like this. If you just lift straight up, you'll sometimes pull the nails out. If you loosen it up first like that, then you can just gently come up, grab that end, and then the other one. Slowly, slowly at first, because you don't want to roll the bees. There we go, we've got some brood there. Good to see. So this is a nice little show of brood and honey. So this is the brood. Sometimes it can be lighter brown than that. And here you've got the honeycomb, which can vary from being quite light like that to being darker, but it's quite a different look once you get your eye in. And you can probably see shining nectar. Give us a thumbs up if you can see shining nectar down the cells there. Look at that. So my dad's a pretty good queen spotter.
He was here.
He just turned up. And he's just wandered off again. Now, I'm looking at this side, we've got some good brood there too. Always on the lookout for sunken dark cappings with piercings in them, which is a sign of a disease called AFB. Can't see any like that, so that's good. And right up here we've got the bee bread. So you can see there's some colours down the cells, and they've already put the pollen in there, topped it with their special sauce and fermented it into a nice sourdough bee bread. And that's what they feed to the young larvae in order for them to grow into a worker bee. If they want it to grow into a queen, they'll feed royal jelly only, which is like mother's milk, something they secrete from their glands. There we go. Now this hive, they have been giving me a few warning hits, but they haven't been stinging. So my father's just joined us, and he's quite good at queen spotting, so I'll throw him under the bus there.
I mean, the more you do it, the more your eye gets in. But one thing that really helped me was I had an observation hive for a long time, so I had the bees inside, and they went through a tube to the outside wall, and they flew out that way. But that meant I could just sit and watch them, you know, hour after hour if I wanted. I didn't have to open them up, the glass wall.
That's neat, good tip. Always keep a beehive in your backyard, on your roof, inside and under your pillow. Here we go. I can see there's a bee emerging there, just here. There's one just starting to chew its way out. In 10 minutes it'll emerge into the hive as a fluffy new baby bee ready to do chores in the hive. There it is, just flapping that little flap up there. And life as a bee is pretty crowded. Even when they're just part way out, they tend to just get run over the top of by hundreds of bees. And it's just what life's like in a beehive, I guess. What's hard to understand is how in the dark, in amongst potentially 50,000 bees, they do this dance and somehow convey accurate information to the other bees of where the flowers are and exactly how far. So it's amazing. And if the bees go there and the nectar flows run out, and they'll come back, they'll find that bee that's doing the dance, they'll jump on it and hold it down so it can stop telling the bees to go to where there's no nectar. All right, so we're going to put that frame aside and pick up another one. We don't need to spot the queen, we're just doing it for fun really. We know that with brood there, that there must be a queen. Okay, I'm going to blow a little bit more smoke again because they're giving me those warning hits on my hands. Now I could put my gloves on, but I think I'll just forge on. I don't mind getting a couple of stings on the hands, but if you do, wear your gloves. Now notice the tone change, can you hear that? Whenever you blow the smoke in, they start fanning furiously and you hear that hum start up as they're clearing the smoke out of their hive. And you wait a little bit and then there'll be a calming effect. And look at these bees just piling out the edge. I smoked in the middle and they've gone down the bottom and up, and they're coming up over here. It's pretty cool. Any more questions, Chase?
Yeah, Cedar. Tanya's tuning in from Tambourine in Queensland, not too far from here. Just noticed that a little bit of honey was leaking from the front of the flow frames, but we're planning on leaving them in over winter. Just wondering why this would be happening. They didn't want to harvest the honey, so wanting to leave it all in there for them.
Okay, that's normal. It depends on how the bees actually seal the flow frames parts, and I will show you on the box we just pulled off over here. So I'm pretty sure what you're talking about is the honey building up in the trough area, and sometimes you get it spilling out to here. Now we've designed a little point so that any honey that goes down into that trough area will leak back to the bees. Now bees being bees will block that up after some time. So you can see, I don't know if you can see that, just below the hive tool there, that little gap. That's where the honey dribbles back into the hive. So I can see that this next one's blocked, but that one isn't. So open this one up, you can see that the wax they've blocked it with. So sometimes all you need to do is just turn this cap around and it'll let the honey that's built up in here drain back into for the bees to reuse. Now, if you pull that out and it's still blocked, then you can use the edge of this, the edge of a key, a stick or anything just to clear that by poking in that area. And then put your cap back in, and we've designed it so there's a bee tongue width here. So no bees can get up and it's unlikely ants will get through there, but the honey and the bees can actually lick up through that area and clear the honey out of the trough. If it's been in there a long time and it's gone all fermented, just put your tube in. The tube we've designed to automatically clear that each time you harvest. So if you just poke the little tongue of the tube in there and drain that honey away, and then you can put the cap back in. So a few options there. Any more questions?
Yeah, Cedar, a couple of shout outs. Chuck Rouse joined us, and Chuck, yeah, we do sell those inner covers, and if you want that plug, you've got to get the Flow Hive 2 or the 2 Plus inner cover. So just giving you the answer to that one rather than calling customer support. Cedar, Scott's asking, not sure where Scott is, but they use a medium super. How full should that be before he adds the Flow super?
I'd always recommend adding the Flow Super first. That way you're much less likely to get impatient and you'll get some action on your flow frames more quickly. Whereas if you add some other supers first, then you're likely to get frustrated and you might not get honey that season. Look at this, the bees made a hole right through the comb and hung a queen cup in there. Let's have a see whether it's actually got... No, it's just a queen cup, it's not capped. You might get a view of that from this angle here. You see that it hangs down a bit like a peanut shell, and the bees will use that to raise a queen. The queen's bigger, so she needs a bigger cell, and she doesn't fit horizontally, so they'll usually hang it vertically.
Amazing.
Okay. Quick look for the queen on that one while we're here.
Yeah, honey she is on that one.
And we'll hang it back. Another tip for looking for the queen is as you pull a frame out, glance down at the other one, because sometimes you'll find
It's running off.
she's running off. Oh look, this frame says septic on it. That's because this hive used to be on top of the septic tank. not because it's actually gone septic. Okay, we better add a little bit more fuel to this. I think. Oh no, it looks okay. Looks fine. All right, we can keep going. So
Hey Cedar, a couple of people noticed saying you don't wear gloves. Do you ever get worried about getting stung?
Yeah, if they start stinging me, I'll put gloves on, but it's sort of one of those things where it is nicer not to wear gloves and a bit easier, but you will get stung on your hands every now and then, so it's a bit up to you and your body and how you go with bee stings as well. But when you start out, wear your gloves. So, it's often the movement you're looking for. You're looking for a little bit of a different walk because the queen bee has bigger legs. She kind of struts rather than little steps. And the other bees are kind of like moving around her as she goes. Nice brood there, which is good to see. We've got a good section of brood. All of those cells, thousands and thousands, are going to turn into new baby bees within the next 11 days.
And then there's new grubs right down the bottom of these cells around them. And if we were lucky, we'd see the eggs right down the bottom as well. I don't know if you can pick that up.
So we've got shining white larvae. So they go through a phase of the larvae stage, which is without the cocoon on, and then 11 days later for the worker bees, they're putting their cocoon on, and then they become a pupa, and they're going through their metamorphosis, growing their wings and eyes. It's an amazing transformation. And then at about day 21, they're emerging into the hive, ready to do work. So we're going to put that out here as well.
Cedar, because you spotted that queen cup, does that mean that the bees are wanting to get ready to swarm, or is that just what they do?
It's a pretty normal thing for the bees to have some supersedure cells in the hive, because at any stage they might decide, oh, the queen could die, and then they're ready to go. They may or may not use it, and if they do use it and the queen's in good health, then that queen, that's the baby queen, will actually get killed before she emerges. And she'll, the queen that's got the egg laying job will make a piping or tooting noise, and the one inside the queen cell, before it even has emerged into the hive, will call back, and then she'll know where to find her and sting her. And that way it's sort of a they're always got backup plans going on, bees, and most of the time they get it right and look after themselves.
Amazing. And on that swarming question, another question is, when bees swarm, do the drones go with them?
The drones, some drones, that's a good question. In a swarm, do the drones go with them? If you've got the answer to that question. Now, I've seen a lot of swarms. Have I been paying attention to whether there's drones in there? I think some do. But basically half the bees get kicked out of the hive. Well, there's some kind of consciousness where half of them know to leave and half stay. And the queen is almost reluctantly going. So she gets pushed out and then she's off and away. And then the bees will follow the queen, but there'll be these amazing flight going on with some bees who have done the scouting work and know where they're going. We'll be doing these big loops through the swarm ball like this and driving it forward faster and faster. And when the swarm knows where it's going, they really pick up speed and you get this amazing show, this ball of bees racing off across the countryside. It's pretty cool. Okay. Let's pull out another one. Now, if we do want to find the queen, we don't want to smoke down on the comb too much. I'm just smoking the end bars so I don't squash bees as I'm manipulating here. But using minimal smoke will help you keep the queen on your frame as well. Now, is she on here? Let's have a look. Now, you had a question about drones. Let's see if we can find a drone bee. I'm not seeing a whole lot of drones in this hive. The numbers of drones do change, and if nectar has been scarce, which it has, they tend to even rip the drones' wings off and kick them out because they just eat a whole lot of food and actually aren't that important for the survival of the colony. Their job is to pass DNA to a queen one day, which will come from another hive, and they'll do that out on the wing. Lots of brood here, so this hive's going to absolutely boom soon. Good to see. Lots of brood. When it's clockwork like that across the frame, it's a wonderful thing.
One drone there.
There we go.
Yeah, that is really just one. Usually you'll see
There's the drone there,
hundreds.
and you can tell by its eyes are big and touch in the centre. Now they don't have stingers, so if you're a beekeeper and you do want to hand a bee to children, hand a drone because they don't have the stingers. Okay, I'll let you go back in. There we go. All right. Thanks for all your questions. If you've got answers to people's questions, please chime in. We've got questions coming from Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok, have we today?
Oh, YouTube. No TikTok
And YouTube.
today.
Okay, coming in from YouTube as well.
Cedar, Anne's asking what Anne is about to remove the queen excluder, getting the super ready for winter. Just wondering if they don't replace the queen excluder in time, will the queen start laying eggs in the flow super?
Possibly. I've found you've got a 50-50 chance there. I've had hives for years and years. The queen never lays in the excluder. You don't need an excluder in that hive, but other hives the queen will lay. Sorry, the queen never lays in the flow frames, but equally she could. So if you want to leave the excluder out and experiment, just check periodically for a little while to make sure she's not laying in the flow frames, and if she's not, then you could go ahead and not use an excluder at all. If you want to be on the safe side, then come springtime, if you've had a long cold winter and you've removed the excluder for that reason, then what you want to do is shake all the bees down to the bottom and put your excluder back in place. If she has laid a little bit in the flow frame, it won't affect their function. You just need to wait at least 24 days for any brood to emerge before you will be harvesting, which you probably won't be anyway at that time.
Right. Another shout out, Deja, who works for us, who's fabulous. She's working from Dinner Plain What a great name. Don't know where it is. I think it's somewhere in the snow. Hey Deja, thanks for tuning in. And Tizza, who tunes in every week, has got a question about found a couple of wax moths in their hive, no slime, wondering what they should do.
Okay, wax moths aren't really a problem in the hive unless your hive is dying out. The bees will not let wax moth venture around inside the hive. So if your bee numbers are very low, then there's probably something else you need to be looking at. Perhaps you don't have a queen or something like that. But the one place you will find wax moth in a flow hive is down in the tray below, because that's an area where the bees aren't policing. So wax falls through the screen bottom board and wax moth can take advantage of that. And to get rid of that, you simply clean your tray out every now and then. Every month or so will do, and then you won't get wax moth building up down below. Now they're not really a problem in flow hive beekeeping. In conventional beekeeping I found wax moth to be an issue because I'd have lots of sticky boxes in the shed, because I'd be taking, instead of storing honey in jars on the shelf like you can with a flow hive, you store honey in boxes on the hives, and then to make it efficient you tend to do a batch processing in the conventional way with the spinning machine and all of that. And then you end up with all of these sticky boxes hanging around in the shed, and you can get wax moth coming in, decimating them, wrecking all of the comb, even eating the wood away. It's really annoying. But when you're just keeping your equipment on the hive, it doesn't seem to be an issue with wax moth.
Right. See, Ben's asking, do we ever get swarms in winter here? Because we seem to always have a good nectar flow all time of the year.
So swarms tend to come in spring here. You may get some in the very last few weeks of winter, but it tends to be springtime when the bees swarm in this area. You get a couple in summer perhaps, and really mainly all of them are swarming in spring. Yeah. If that hive's going to swarm. If you've done your management, then hopefully they won't swarm.
What's the longest you can leave a hive without having to do any maintenance on it?
Oh, that's a good question. Now here in New South Wales we have a new requirement where we do need to get in here and do a mite check every 16 weeks or once in every 16-week period. So it's an important thing to do to detect and try and stop the spread of those menace varroa mites. So that's new, but previous to that, beekeepers in the commercial sense would make sure they would get through each hive a couple of times a year, going through every brood frame, and that's good beekeeping, to get in there and check for pests and disease. So you really want to be doing at least that, and then whatever other requirements there are in your area. If you've got mites in your continent, then you'll be doing some management practices which might require a lot more in the early spring. And but yeah, I mean, you find bees in a wild hive in a tree, you can't inspect that, and you'll see them there for years and years and years. So they are capable of going a long time without intervention, but it's good beekeeping to get in there and check for pests and disease, limit the spread of those, and it's a really important thing to do.
So many people in Australia, experienced beekeepers, recommend in the springtime and the summer every 2 weeks. At least every 2 weeks. And if you're a weekend beekeeper, then you might have to do it, you know, most weekends, 3 weekends out of a month or something like that. But I'd like to also turn that question on its head. It's a bit like, how often do I have to pat my dog? Maybe you could begin opening your and just say how many times is too much, because to get, you know, familiar with a beehive, you know, like experienced beekeepers are, it's a pleasure in itself. And if you're new to beekeeping, why not open them, at least once a week, when it's good weather, calm and warm, and really get to know them. And so it turned the question on its head. What's the most you should open a beehive, you know? Like, is there a most you should pat your dog? I don't know. But yeah, the idea is not to have any reluctance about opening a beehive, because you might, one morning or afternoon, you might go out and say, gee, they're not looking right at the front there. You would just have no hesitation, if it's the right time of day or whatever, to go in and have a look. And so I would encourage new beekeepers to open it a lot and get to know their bees.
It's a really good time when the bees are a smaller colony. Let's say you've just installed a nuke. It's a little bit less intimidating to get started with a small colony and watch it build, and your confidence can build with that because there'll be less bees to deal with. You might not have your top box on, which means you don't have to lift that off first and all of that. So quite easy to pop the lid and just watch them grow. And if you've got foundationless frames, then you want to be inspecting that so they don't go wonky, and you can push that back in line. So if you are starting with a nuke or a swarm, and get in there every week when they're beginning, just to make sure they're going straight. Once they're all straight, then you don't need to inspect it so often. So like anyone, you'll get different answers from different beekeepers, so you can also ask you can also ask your local beekeepers, because each area has its own requirements as well.
Nice, great answer. If I was a dog, I don't know which one would I live with, Cedar or Stu? who would pat me the most? Hey, this is a question from Brett. Kia ora, Brett. He's calling in from New Zealand, my homeland. Just saying, started managing 20 hives and is just shaking them down to the brood box and shed their honey and brood when necessary. It's the beginning of winter in New Zealand, so I imagine it's getting pretty cold. Just wondering, is there anything else he should watch out for during this time, getting them prepared for winter?
Okay, great. Beekeeping in New Zealand, beautiful spot to collect honey. I love going around New Zealand and sampling all the different flavours, very different to here. So getting them ready for winter. So as I understand, Trace, that they've packed it down already?
Yeah, so he's packed it down, turned it into a brood box,
yep.
Shaking them down, shed the honey and brood when necessary. And just wondering, anything else you'd recommend to do getting ready going into winter?
So it'd be a good time now to feed them what's called a thick syrup, just to maximise their stores. Now you've shaken them down into a single brood box, so you're going to want to make sure they've got enough stores in there. If they got honey all full on the edges, then that's about as best you can do. But if you've got sort of dry comb on the edges, then they may not have enough stores to survive the New Zealand winter, in which case you'll feed them a 2-to-1 ratio sugar to water, cook that up, let it cool, and put it in whatever type of feeder you like. An easy one is put that syrup in a Ziploc bag, poke a few pinholes on it, throw it on top of the inner cover, take the plug out, put your gabled roof back on, and they'll get up there and they'll suck on that. In extreme cold areas, some people will be feeding even a fondant, like a sticky toffee for the bees, and that'll give them something if they start to starve during the long cold winter. So if you've only got one box, they haven't got a full box of honey to survive the winter, that'll be the main thing to watch out for, is enough stores to survive. Ask your local beekeepers whether your configuration is likely to survive the winter like that with minimal stores.
The other thing you want to do in New Zealand and most countries except Australia is a mite count, because you want the bees to go into their sort of quieter semi-hibernation phase with as low a mite count as possible, and this is where you should get local advice as to what it should be depending on your type of test, because otherwise the varroa mite will feed on your bees over the winter and it'll pretty much kill them. They feed on the fat body of the bee, that is all of its energy storages, as well as sometimes the blood, and so if you have a too high a mite count in your beehive in New Zealand, it'll die over winter. So you do that, and most beekeepers do some sort of varroa prevention, treatment. Anyway, that's we're not experts in that. Luckily, we've been lucky so far in Australia. Maybe we're about to learn, we don't know yet, but our authorities are doing the best they can to try and stop the varroa incursion.
So look at that, that's a full frame of honey. You can see no brood on there, and it was heavy pulling it out, so I suspected it had a lot of honey on it. Now, you could choose the time to take this frame away or cut out that comb and give them a fresh one. If it was springtime, I'd be doing that as a management practice. Would be to take the honey away from the edge and put the blank frames back into the centre. And that way you're cycling out old frames towards the edges. It's good to do a few frames each spring. So a big comb of honey there. I'm going to leave it because the bees are a bit hungry at the moment and I want them to have those honey stores over this winter time. Okay, now we didn't see the queen, but that's okay. We haven't been through all of the frames either, so we'd have to methodically go back through all of them to find her. But I'm not worried because we saw plenty of brood in there. So I'm going to start putting it back together now as we answer some more questions.
Nice. See, this is a good one. Stu's just wandered off. He's on a call. But the question was, Cedar, did you get into beekeeping because of Stu, or was it the other way round?
It was because of Stu and my grandfather, actually. Fond memories of going to my grandfather's farm. He had lots of hives, and he could. We would go there and harvest honey, and they had like pedal. They invented like a pedal-powered extractor, and we'd jump on that and pedal the thing around. It was a lot of fun, and the frames would fly around and fling off and hit the wall, and all sorts of messy things would happen. So yeah, it's been sort of a family tradition. So my grandfather had bees, and then growing up we had beehives as well. And it was in my young 20s that I started taking it on a small scale commercial apiary, and that's what sort of started the idea of, hang on, do we have to go through this process of taking all the honey frames out, smoking the bees, taking the frames to the processing shed, decapping, putting them in a spinner, spinning it, making a huge mess in the shed that we lived in and so on? Can't we just tap the honey out? And it was from that thought that sparked a decade-long pursuit of inventing the flow frame, and my father and I did it in the end, and it's so nice to have a community of you all around the world using our invention. It's a dream come true for us.
Fantastic. Such a great story too. And yeah, I'm glad someone asked that question. Bob's asking, noticed yesterday there was a large number of the normal of drones leaving the hive. Any thoughts? They're located at Lake Macquarie, and also saying how much they love these live casts.
Okay, great. Yes, sometimes there'll be lots of drones leaving, and the bees manage how many drones they want to make. Now, it's only really an issue if there's no worker bees, and that can happen if the queen stops laying. So if the queen stops laying or is no longer present, then the worker bees can start laying, but they can't fertilise the eggs because they haven't collected sperm, so they lay unfertilised eggs, which are male bees. So the hive will slowly turn into a bunch of drones that don't do any work and eat all the honey and slowly dies out, a bit like one of those bad share houses. Yeah?
Oh, I was just going to say, it's unclear what, I think it's he, is it? Said?
Yes, Bob, yeah.
Because it might be just, the drones will leave the hive for their mating, to try and mate with the queen at specific times. I think it's something like 11 o'clock in the morning, they'll go out for 2, maybe 3 hours. And so you might have just been watching at that time when a whole lot of drones were leaving the hive, going to search for a queen. And that's a whole fascinating process in itself. So it's unclear what you mean by a whole lot of drones leaving the hive. So they do leave at the same time.
Yeah, and it's normal to see lots of drones. Some hives will have more than others. I wouldn't worry about it too much.
No,
but just make sure when you open the side windows you're seeing lots of workers as well, and then it's not a problem.
Nice. Frank says, noticing the bees here are so gentle, wondering, do we requeen every time we get a mean hive?
We try to. If we get a mean hive, it's not that fun to deal with, especially when we want to, do live show and tells. Every now and then we do get a mean hive, and we have got a couple down the bottom here. And it's just a case of changing those queens when you're sick of having a mean hive, I guess.
Is it like workers see?
If,
Or dogs?
I won't say anything about staff. Yeah, so basically, I used to keep very wild bees, and it's just because I never knew anything different. They were always wild when I was growing up, and that's what I thought was normal. So I expected to be getting lots of stings through my pants and my shirt when I was doing beekeeping. But if you've got some nice genetics, then you can stand around like my father is with a bee on his shirt and not really worry about it. But if they're grumpy, you know about it, because you open the lid and they're coming out and smashing into your veil like at high speed, and it's like, whoa, they have got some aggressive traits. Now, if you're comfortable managing a hive that's aggressive, then it's not a problem. They're often quite good foragers, and they're quite good at keeping their hive nice and clean, all of that. But if it's uncomfortable for you and uncomfortable for anyone else around you, i.e. they're starting to hassle people or sting people, then get in there, change the queen for some known genetics, buy in a queen from a queen breeder, take out the old queen, day later insert the new one. You find a month later the whole temperament will shift to a friendly, nice, calm colony. You can work like this.
Fantastic. Now, where was that? Oh, that's right. Veronica asked this good question, and it's a question that get asked quite a lot, I think, through customer support. Other than cold climates, what are the criteria for choosing between a 6 or a 7 flow hive?
Okay, so both work. It's really often people just wanting to match their own equipment. Now, the bigger sizes are more popular in the colder areas, simply because you get a little bit more honey stores on the edges of your hive, both in the brood and the next box up, so there's more for that hive to last a really long cold winter. But if we go down south, like I have to Tasmania here, the southernmost state, where it's very cold long winters, one beekeeper will say, no, you must have a 3-stack high box or you will not survive the winter, and it has to be a 10 frame, so the bigger size. And you go around the corner, another one says, oh no, I just use this same configuration, 8 frame Langstroth and a single super, and my bees are fine through the winter. So it's also about asking around, seeing what local beekeepers are doing, ask more than one beekeeper, make up your own mind and try it. But basically, I prefer the smaller size just because they're just a bit easier to lift. So it's a bit lighter to lift the boxes off when you've got the Flow 6, which is the same size as an 8 frame Langstroth.
Nice. Sergi got 4 frames of bees about 5 weeks ago, and now they've expanded onto 2 more frames. Just wondering, when should they put the super on? Don't know what size box, maybe an 8 frame box?
Not yet. Wait till they've filled out all of the frames. You want the bees to be using and have drawn all the wax in all of the frames here before you put your super on. And if you're just heading into winter, then you would want to wait and put it on in the springtime. If you're in the northern hemisphere, then as soon as they've filled out all the frames, go ahead and put your super on top.
Nice. And Brett, our Kiwi beekeeper, came in and said, yep, thanks for that, and also has put in Varroa straps that will be removed soon.
Okay, Varroa straps, yes, there are some nice solutions these days that you can put in. I'm assuming you're meaning straps in the hive that have oxalic acid on it. Okay. Next, we're just going to put this frame back together. Now I'm just being conscious that any of the honeycomb not to press against each other. Honeycomb, the honey in the cells stick out a little bit. You don't want it pressing up against each other because the hive beetles might decide to use that as an area to lay where the bees can't get to them. So even if I don't get the order right when I put them back, I just want to make sure there's not a bunch of honeycomb pressing against another piece of honeycomb where the bees can't actually get in there and service that area.
Yeah, the noise changed just then, wasn't it?
Yeah, it really does.
The septic one.
Septic frame, that's right. Okay. Any more questions?
Yeah, we're getting a few drone questions today. Another one is, do you get rid of the drones or do you leave them? This person was told by an apiarist that the drone eggs hang down on the frames and you should remove them.
Okay, so the queens are the ones that hang down on the frames, and some people will be removing those queen cups or queen cells because they might have purchased a nice queen off a queen breeder and they don't want it superseded. As a new beekeeper, I would just say leave it up to the bees. You don't want to get in there manipulating unless you really know what you're doing. Just let the bees decide whether they want to knock off those queen cells or not. Now, your question was about drones, and people do ask whether you should kill the drones or not. I don't. Some beekeepers like to kill the drones for a specific reason, and that's usually if they're in a continent with varroa mites, then they have a slightly longer gestation. They're the ones that get targeted by the mites, and you can put in a foundation sheet that has drone size cells on it to encourage drone laying on that frame, and then remove that frame altogether as a way to remove a whole bunch of the varroa mites out of the hive. So that is something that some beekeepers do.
Nice. So, are there any tips on encouraging the bees to use the super? We've had someone call in on Insta from Florida just saying the bees don't seem to be quite getting used to using the super yet, and I know you've got a few tips up your sleeve.
Ah, yeah, okay. So the best solution for getting bees to start using your flow frame is a lot of bees in your hive and a good nectar flow. When those things coincide, then things will happen very quickly. Now, if you open the side windows and there's not many bees in there, it'll take some time. If you've got more boxes underneath it, then take one away. Keep it in this configuration you see here, and that will be a great help to getting them to wax up and use those flow frames for the first time. But one little trick you can do is scrape off some burr comb just like this. So get your hive tool and just grab the comb. You don't need it. You don't need any honey in it. It doesn't matter if there is, but you're grabbing some wax like that. So you scrape it off. Beekeepers often like to scrape that off anyway, just to make the excluder easier to get off next time. And you'll be scraping that wax like that and just mash it into the flow frame surface. You won't damage the flow frames. Just put it on there like that, and then put that on the window side so you can enjoy watching them recycle that wax, and it'll get them started in that little area. But you won't get any real action and any honey storage until you've got lots of bees and a good nectar flow happening.
Right. Cedar, why? This is my question actually. Cedar, why is it burr comb? Why do you call it burr comb?
There's two names for the wax that's not inside the frame square. So you've got the wax there where we want it for management, and then you've got bees will be bees and they'll fill any empty space they can find with their comb. So we call it burr comb when it's just on top of the frames, and brace comb when it's connecting to the walls and bracing things together.
Oh.
But it's really just comb.
Yeah, just a different name.
It's just the same thing. Yeah.
Kathy's saying, could we put a permanent live camera into the hive so we can watch the bees all working?
Oh, that's
Wouldn't
a good idea.
Good?
That'd be a good thing to do, and we could have a live stream for you. And I tell you what, we'll do it as long as you keep it as your screensaver on your screen.
Oh, great idea. Question, what should I do about cockroaches on the bottom tray of my brood box?
The bottom tray, cockroaches in the bottom.
Yeah.
Just clean out your tray. They're going in there to eat some pollen that's fallen down or some debris that's in there. So just give your tray a clean, put it back, problem fixed. It's not really an issue for the hive. It's not actually inside the hive either. So it doesn't really matter. Okay, time for a couple more last questions as we put this hive back together. They've been very patient with me. They've settled in. They were a little bit antsy in the beginning, but my father proved that they weren't really grumpy at all, waltzing up with no bee suit on. And here we go. Look at all of those bees just hanging on that frame. Lots and lots of bees.
Is that a normal amount of bees, Cedar, for a hive?
Yeah, this is about normal. This is what you want to see when you open it. And there's a whole lot more bees in the top box, which is just over there. Now, I was just having a quick look for the queen because there's so many bees on here. I thought that maybe this is where she was hiding out. Sometimes she'll be a bit stealth and she'll hide in amongst all the bees.
No sign of it. Cedar, beekeeper tuned in and go, why don't we just put dots on our queens?
We do sometimes. We do sometimes put dots on the thorax at the back there, the shiny back plate. Doesn't seem to harm the bee and does make it easier to find, although it's kind of nice to get your eye in without looking for that dot, because there'll be plenty of times where that queen with the dot on it superseded and you'll need to find the queen. So better practice is just to learn to find the queen. Now, if we really wanted to find her now, we'd have to go through again and go through all the frames. We didn't go through them all today. Too busy chin wagging. Okay. Now we've got one more frame to fit in. I'm going to smoke the bees out of the way so I don't squash any. And got any last questions?
Yeah, Cedar, are you putting those brood frames back in the same order that you took them out?
I'm definitely trying to, but the main thing to do is just eyeball down between the frames and make sure there's not honeycomb like this. See how it sticks out a bit? Pressing into another bit sticking out. If you see that, then either chop that honeycomb away and the bees will clean it up, or move the frames around so that it's got the original one it was mating with, because the bees need a gap between all frame parts in order to service them. The hive beetles might get in there and lay otherwise, and then you're on the way to a slime out. I've seen a very strong colony slime out from hive beetles like that. It's the end of the colony, simply because the frames were squashed together and the honeycomb parts were touching each other. Now the frames do always need to be squashed together for the correct space, but you don't want the comb in the frames touching each other.
Cedar, how does the queen change the bee's temperament?
So the queen mates in the first week of her life, usually, weather depending, and she might go on 1 or 2 mating flights, and she'll mate with, say, up to 30 or so drones, and all of those drones come from other beehives in the area. So if she's mated with some rascals from down the road that are quite aggressive, then she'll bring those traits back into the hive. If she's mated with bees that are nice and calm, she'll bring those traits back. So what bee breeders do is they try and quarantine an area where the bees can mate, and sometimes they'll be artificially inseminating with drones they've chosen from calm hives as well. And that way they can get known traits for a queen. So when you then go and bring that queen back into your hive and change it, so you take the old queen away, a day later you put the new one in, worker bees only last a month or so, and that means in a month or so all the bees that you see are new bees, except for the queen, which can last up to 6 years. And the drones can last 6 months, but they don't sting. They don't have that job of guarding. So all of the guard bees have now changed temperament, and that's how replacing the queen changes the temperament of your hive. And it can also happen the other way, where you had a nice friendly hive and all of a sudden they turn aggressive because they replaced the queen, or the queen died for some reason, and the new queen mated with some aggressive bees from down the road.
Oh, nice. Cedar, can you use our brood frames with foundation?
Certainly can. You can use them with wax foundation or plastic foundation, or we include the code guide if you want to do foundationless frames, which I'm a big fan of, but not everyone is. These are all foundationless frames, and it works really nicely, saves a bunch of work at night waxing and wiring, and gives the bees freedom to do just what they choose. Okay, there we go. Our hive is back together, but what we still need to consider is the frame spacing. Now, these are all well drawn out, so it's not such an issue, but it's good practice just to push them together and keep any spare spaces right on the edge of the hive like that. So we're going to go around to the corners and just lever it across like this, just pushing the frames together, and that way the spacing will be correct for the bees to draw their comb. They're less likely to put any comb in between the frames, which is annoying for when you're doing your inspections. Okay, that's it. So next we need to put our excluder back on. And there's a lot of bees just on the edge here. Look how many there are. It's a nice healthy colony. Look at that. So we could use our bee brush just to put them back inside so they're not running over the lip as we're trying to put the top box on. And you can just grab them like this, pick them up and put them in. There we go. Look at them all disappearing back into the hive. I don't really like it, so you'll notice they'll start getting a bit more antsy when you start moving them around like that. But the next thing I'm going to do is add a bit of smoke and actually get them to run down inside the hive so that when we put our top box on, there's less bees to deal with there. We don't squash too many. Okay. So you see they're clearing out of the way now. And it goes on there like that. You can give it a bit of a wiggle to move any bees out of the way. And go and get our top box.
Do you worry about taking that burr comb off their seeds, off that queen excluder? Or do you just leave it?
I'm just going to leave it, but
Yep.
you could take it off if you want to. So I'm going to add a bit of smoke to this hive too, because they're all over the areas where I want to put this box on. Now it's a bit tricky. If you have a second person, it's often handy to get them to add a bit of smoke as you do this, because you've got bees now all the way around the edges again under this excluder. There we go. That's it. Okay, now we've got quite a heavy box there. Choosing the moment, just going to keep it up on the angle, brush the remaining bees quickly, put that down. Okay, so that's got that top box back on. Next we just need to line it up by sliding it a little bit like this. We'll slide nice and slow into position and put our roof and our covers back on. Time for one last question.
Kathy's saying, where's your dad when you need him?
Yeah, exactly.
Probably having a coffee somewhere. Amber's wondering that the bees have built up comb underneath the frame. Should they be cutting that off?
You can do, certainly. It'll make it a little bit easier to get the excluder off next time, but it's also you can leave it there. Different schools of thought on whether to leave burr comb or keep it all nice and tidy. It really depends. It's up to you. The bees won't mind either way. Don't forget to put your covers back on. You don't want the sun shining into your hive and getting the temperature too hot. You could get wax melting and all sorts of things in your hive. There we go. So, thank you so much for watching, and the theme of today was World Bee Day. It's so amazing to have bees on the agenda and really recognising the important role they play in the whole matrix of life that we all depend on in our wild systems and also in our agricultural systems. And a hive like this can pollinate an extraordinary amount of flowers, actually 50 million a day, which is just mind-blowing. So they've become a really important part of our food chain, and so of the beekeepers. So we need beekeepers to look after enough bees in order to have enough surviving colonies to do the pollination work that's needed. So thanks to the bees, and thanks for tuning in and all your great questions. Let us know if there's anything you'd like us to cover next week. By all means, get in there and help answer some of the remaining questions that I haven't.